Okay, guys, so we're going to do a quick 5-minute lecture again, just covering yesterday's material that talked about the Korean War, some of the decisions that Harry S. Truman made, what was the concept of limited war versus the full-on war, and actually marking through some of your responses, I feel like generally you did a better job of understanding and connecting the ideas here than you did with the first assignment. Which is really good. And I was also impressed with some of your grammar and mechanics. Just putting that one additional mark on each question seems to really motivate you guys to get your proofreading done. So that's looking pretty good so far. But let's get into the material. So we were talking about the concept of proxy wars, or essentially, the first military conflict during the Cold War. And so it happens in North Korea, which is pretty obvious. The entire video kind of talks about the Korean conflict, essentially. The thing that we really need to understand about this is that this is quite a bit of a different situation than what was happening during the Berlin blockades. Okay? One of the main reasons that this is a different type of conflict than what was happening at the Berlin blockades is that during the Berlin blockades, the USSR did not have a nuclear bomb. So the United States, when they started dropping cargo and aid materials into West Berlin, they knew that they might be threatening a war to happen, like a physical, violent war, like happened in Korea. But the difference during that time was that the United States knew that they were the only people with the atomic bombs at this point. Okay. However, when the USSR begin developing their own bombs and it's successful, they know that they have a footing in the international stage to challenge capitalism in the United States. So that's why the conflict in South Korea, or just generally in Korea, is very different than the conflict that happens in the blockades. In fact, Berlin blockades was not really even a conflict. It was just the USA, kind of flexing their muscle, saying, watch us do what we want, and watch you, the USSR, who does not have a nuclear bomb, do nothing about it, essentially, and back down. Now, we talked about in our question the concept of limited war. Now, really, the entire reason for why the choices were made by Harry S. Truman to keep the war at a limited capacity, meaning not using the entirety of the resources available to the country, is that essentially a full-on war in this scenario, now that the USSR also has a bomb, means that we go into a full nuclear war. Okay? And this is one of the main reasons why Harry S. Truman kind of dawdles or dilly-daddles. I don't even know if that's a correct term. I don't know why I'm using that term. Why he's kind of dragging his ass on making decisions and making the calls that he needs to make. Because really, over his head is the fate of humanity, essentially. Right? Does he choose to push further like General MacArthur wants to and push into China and be the offender in this situation? Or does he back out and kind of try and remain on that 38th parallel on the peninsula of Korea to try and avoid war? Okay? So this is the difference. In Berlin, okay, Harry S. Truman does not take a second to even think about, yes, we need to make sure that we put in place the Marshall Plan and provide aid to the West Berliners. Okay. But in the case of Korea, the difference is that USSR is now armed with a bomb. And therefore, the decisions that Truman makes in this point in time can possibly lead to a nuclear war. So that's kind of the main difference. The one thing that I generally wanted to see, and I believe this was question 2, right? Do you believe that there were better alternatives to the decision that Harry S. Truman made? Some of you guys kind of criticized him, maybe even his economic policies. But what I really wanted to see you guys talk about is the idea of the USSR having the nuclear bomb available to them. And that's why it is such a different conflict than the Berlin blockades. So as we go into it, the idea of this communist threat is really what they're more of the fear, okay, of the communist threat is less about the ideology. As we move forward into this chart where conflict gets higher and higher, okay, it's less about the idea of communism that the individual people are now afraid of. It is the idea of the enemy represented by communism, okay, is the enemy holding the power to destroy the country, okay, which is essentially the atomic bomb. It is no longer just an ideological warfare. It is about the survival of an entire country. And this is where really the individuals in the United States get involved and start fearing, not necessarily, where was I? I just lost my train of thought. So this is where the idea of the monolithic communism comes in, okay? The question 3 that we talked about. This is no longer about an ideological warfare as it was, say, at the Potsdam Conference or at the start of this entire Cold War conflict. It is now just about the nuclear war, okay? The fear is just this one singular thing, okay? And as we will see in today's assignment, okay, when we talk about McCarthyism and how fear kind of takes over the entirety of the United States, okay, fear is really what the Cold War is about. Not necessarily about the fear of spread of communism. Yes, that was a big thing, but really the Cold War is about the fear of the atomic bomb, okay? And this is where we're really going to jump into the ideas of paranoia and uncertainty. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, always feel free to call me or contact me. Today's assignment, we're going to be really referring back to a lot of some materials that we've covered in the past. I'm going to try and connect some of the political actions of the United States to maybe the early steps of totalitarianism that we talked about. And I also want you to try and compare and contrast some of the actions of Joseph McCarthy, okay, which McCarthyism is named after, is not on this yet. But I want you guys to try and connect some of the specific ideas given by John Locke and John Stuart Mills. Okay, some of this philosophical ideas on what liberalism is. And I want you to tell me whether or not the actions of Joseph McCarthy follows these philosophical ideas of liberalism, or if they do not follow. Okay, I want you to be really specific. Use specific actions of Joseph McCarthy and compare it to specific philosophical ideologies presented by either John Locke or John Stuart Mill. Okay, hopefully that helps guide you for our next assignment. I'll post this right now. I will talk to you guys soon.